Hello, my friends, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. So I'm still obsessed with Dragon Age, and after thinking about it a long time and thinking about, there was actually one specific article I'd been thinking about, and I wanted to find it to talk about it. And in the course of looking for it, I found, a lot of articles. And I'm not going to read all of them. I know I have a tendency to read the articles out loud to y'all, but we're not going to do that tonight because I don't know that I have enough time to make that long of a video. However, I will link all the articles in the description so that you can see them if you would like to see the full article. I am going to try to read what I think is the most important parts of the articles. January 22nd of 2016, where David Gaider, writer, leaves BioWare. David Gaider was the writer on a number of games, including Knights of the Old Republic, time on Baldur's Gate 2, Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, Mass Effect, basically a lot of the CRPGs that we remembered and loved. He seems to be, one of those grumpy creatives, but he did make some of course, my favorite stories. In 2023, he claims that BioWare quietly resented its writers for a studio who was known for its stories, for its characters. It seems really interesting. He actually did it in a string of posts on Twitter. Gaider said video game writing was constantly undervalued, even so at BioWare, which, in Gaider's words, built its success on a reputation for good stories and characters. It slowly turned from a company that vocally valued its writers to one where we were quietly resented, with a reliance on expensive narrative seen as the albatross holding the company back. Maybe that sounds like a heavy charge, but it's what I distinctly felt up until I left in 2016, he continued. Suddenly, all anyone in charge was asking was, how do we have less writing? A good story would simply happen via magic wand rather than something that needed support and priority. So that really does explain a lot of where gaming is going in general, if you think about it. They're farming the apparently expensive work of actually writing the stories out to consulting groups instead of doing it its own work. Gaider's final game for BioWare was Anthem, the studio's poorly received play for the multiplayer shooter market. Gaider contributed to the game's early version before he left the studio mid-2016. Anthem ultimately released in 2019 to middling reviews. BioWare's boss at the time of Gaider's departure, Aaryn Flynn, departed the company himself a year after, and we'll get to him in a minute. Gaider, meanwhile, has gone on to build upcoming musical RPG Stray Gods at Summerfall Studios, the studio he co-founded in 2019. So after Gaider left, we move on to Aaryn Flynn. Now, Aaryn Flynn I've talked about before. I don't believe I remembered his name previously. He's the one at Inflection Studios, the one that Aaron's parting message on the BioWare site. After 17 years with BioWare, today I announced that I'll be leaving the studio at the end of July and that Casey Hudson is returning to Edmonton to take on the role of general manager for BioWare. I joined BioWare in Edmonton right out of university. I was privileged to get a chance to join a group of people working in the coolest, most creative thing I could imagine. Growing up at BioWare, the events in my life were intimately intertwined with the events at the studio. I got married just after we finished Neverwinter Nights, which is one of my favorite games. My first son was born while we were wrapping up Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, while my second son was born right after Jade Empire. From my first day until now, I have learned much, met great colleagues and friends, and got the chance to help give players some truly incredible experiences. Every time I think I've found a favorite game-making experience, we start something new and somehow find fun and satisfaction in the new challenges. I have been contemplating changes in my own life for some time, but when I heard that Casey had confirmed he was up to the task, I realized the opportunities before us. I will be working with him over the next couple of weeks to help him catch up and do my part to set him up for success, to be the best general manager he can be. In closing, let me thank our players for everything they've given us over these many years, and to say from the bottom of my heart how important you are to me and the rest of BioWare. I have gone to work every day knowing that I am fortunate to have all the opportunities I have had at BioWare because of you. Doing whatever I could do to help our developers create some of the best games in the industry for you all has been the most humbling experience of my life. Now I'll be playing BioWare's game in the future from an exciting new perspective. Yours, And Casey Hudson had actually left BioWare previously, gone to Microsoft, and then returned to BioWare at this time. Flynn had been at BioWare for 17 years. He had been the general manager for 7 years and oversaw the release of Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and Star Wars The Old Republic franchises. He was also the original director for Anthem, which we all know how that turned out, unfortunately. But he left before that came out, so God only knows how much of that was really him. Of course, he was also part of Mass Effect Andromeda, which didn't go well, and very likely is part of what left him to leave. I'm going to say that there's an excellent chance that he and Gaider both left due to what they were seeing happening at BioWare. There is an article I found where he talks about the way they made the games, which was basically they didn't know the rules, so they couldn't break the rules. Now, there were some rules he had to know. He was talking about here, but not everything can be achieved by breaking the rules. In his earliest days at BioWare, Flynn had to learn the rules before he could break them. I did all the cinematic camera work and programming that system on Knights of the Old Republic back in the day, as well as the combat, Flynn explains. I remember our lead animator, he came into my office one time, and he came in and he plunked this book down on my desk. It was the 5 C's of cinematography, motion picture filming techniques. I said, okay, what is this? And he said, well, because it's a Star Wars game, we have to make this thing look like a Star Wars movie. So to do that, you've got to take this book and you've got to get that into the game. And we don't get development like that anymore. I mean, they don't, I guess in many ways it's actually easier now because of the work he put in. And so they can look like movies, but instead of looking like movies incidentally because, for example, it was inspired by a movie, they want the games to be movies, which is depressing in its own right. I said, oh my God, how are we going to do this? We had to learn a lot of math. We had to do a lot of fraternal math and a lot of those things. But ultimately, we pulled it off, and it was really about this idea of not knowing we couldn't do it. Another rule broken in a way. And of course, this is about the time they switched to the Frostbite engine. We'll talk about that a little later as well, because that was actually the article that got me started down this rabbit hole. That was the one I'd read. And he talks about how Frostbite didn't really have a lot of the tools they needed for a RPG, and they had to make it work anyway, which I imagine is part of what contributed to the problems with Andromeda. He says, we were grappling with Frostbite as an engine as it was getting used more and more around EA. And there's more and more pressure for Frostbite to do all the things you want a general engine to do, Flynn said. And so these were a lot of variables to go through, and I think we lost some of the strength of that ignorance, right? We started to know too much about how these things work. And yeah, that's very likely true. They started seeing where the walls were, and instead of working their ways around them, because they didn't know they were there, they just stopped at them. We started to know that there are things you could do and couldn't do. So we kind of got in our own heads at the times and didn't trust ourselves and didn't trust we could still tell amazing stories and push the craft of storytelling in ways that would be good for the studio. You know, thinking about it, there's a really good chance that's part of the issues we have today in general. With so much known in game design, there's a lot of chance that people just don't understand that you don't have to follow the rules. You can make your own rules. Flynn's experiences with BioWare have impactful. I understand this is an old article, but for the love of God, people, have somebody read. Don't you have editors? Oh, wait, they're too busy making fun of people online or calling people's wives. Anyway, Flynn's experience with BioWares have impacted his current philosophy on game development and the game industry heavily. And he finishes with an anecdote from his time as CEO of Inflection, along with his current conclusion on where the industry is headed next. We were talking to publishers, and I looked at the deals, and the deal didn't make sense. I looked at what they might have wanted from the project, and it didn't make sense. We have a profitable project, but it felt lonely as hell, because I could explain all the reasons it made sense, and the people could agree with me on a human level, and then say on an industry level, that isn't the way things are done. But we know the way things are done isn't working, so we got to change it. And that's part of why I like Nightingale. It has an amazing feel to it. Yeah, some of it's the classic, survival stuff, but there's something special to it for me. So still in 2017, Mike Laidlaw has parted ways with the RPG rabble after 14 years. I'm going to go ahead and read his statement. Hey everyone, it's with a mix of emotion that I'm announcing my time with BioWare has ended. After 14 years and a chance to work on Jade Empire, Mass Effect, and all things Dragon Age, it's time for me to move on. In my time at BioWare, I have been lucky to work with some of the most talented and hardworking people in the industry. It's been an honor to be part of the Dragon Age team, and I have every confidence that the world we've created together is in good hands, and I'm excited for the road ahead. For the near future, I plan to spend my time reconnecting with all the amazing games and worlds that my peers have created, and I look forward to sharing those experiences with you all on Twitch and Twitter. To everyone who's taken time to share feedback and experiences, your amazing cosplays and artistic creations, thank you. You've made my time in Thedas amazing. Your passion inspires me, and I look forward to our next adventure together. Master Ananas, Mike. Mike, interestingly enough, left BioWare and went to Beamdog. Beamdog is who currently has Neverwinter Nights. Apparently, they're a Baldur's Gate enhancer. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I haven't heard that term before. I will have to do some more research on that later when I'm not deep in my Dragon Age issues. But he did go ahead and actually follow some of the creative stuff from BioWare, which is interesting in and of itself. So that's 3 down. In 2019, Dragon Age lead producer Fernando Mello left BioWare. He was the second high-profile departure in the week. The previous one was Ben Irving, but he had more to do with Mass Effect and Anthem than he did any of the Dragon Age stuff. Fernando Mello, who acted as senior producer for Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2, was lead producer on the upcoming and still untitled 4th Dragon Age game. Mello announced on Twitter late last night that he had left BioWare that day, posting a parting email to the rest of his co-workers and colleagues. In the letter, Mello also states that Dragon Age, which is codenamed Morrison, was poised to become the definitive Dragon Age experience. He also said he is looking forward to enjoying the game as a fan this time. Not a lot of information on that one. Then in 2020, Casey Hudson, who you remember previously took over for Aaryn Flynn, and Mark Darrah announced their retirements. And this is 2020. Hudson said in his note, after nearly 20 years with BioWare, he made the decision to retire from the studio and make way for the next generation of studio leaders. I can't help but feel that maybe some of these people were pushed out. For one, their salaries had to be very expensive. And for two, of course, they wanted to do things the old ways and not necessarily the DEI ways. When I became studio GM a little over 3 years ago, our goal as a leadership team was to position our people and projects for long-term success, Hudson say. Now, as BioWare celebrates its 25th anniversary, the studio is poised for an exciting new era of amazing games. This year, we've been inspired by the continued community support for our ongoing work on Star Wars The Old Republic and Anthem. A few months ago, we provided a deeper look at the work that's going into the next huge Dragon Age game. And on N7 Day, we announced Mass Effect, the Legendary Edition, and gave a hint at what's coming next in the Mass Effect universe. It's an exciting time, both in terms of projects you've heard about and some things not yet announced. Arriving at this point in time has been an opportunity for me to reflect on my own future, and 2020 has been a year that forced us all to reimagine how we think about work and life. For me, it's been the realization that I still have tremendous energy to create, but also that I need to try something different. I'm not sure exactly what that is yet, but I know I want to start by rediscovering my creative passion through more personal work. Darrah will be replaced by BioWare Austin Studio creative director Christian Daly as an executive director on Dragon Age. Melee said, like Hudson, Darrah called his departure from BioWare a retirement from the studio. This has been a very difficult decision for me, Darrah said. The team of amazing developers on Dragon Age make my life fuller and better. They have taught me so much, but the strength of the team is also what makes this possible. I know that Dragon Age won't just survive without me. It will thrive. Hudson's first credit at BioWare came as a designer, an artist on MDK2, released in 2000. He left BioWare in 2014 and joined Microsoft the following year. Hudson rejoined BioWare in 2017, replacing the departing general manager Aaryn Flynn. Darrah joined BioWare in 1997, wow, and originally worked as a programmer, according to his LinkedIn profile. Interesting, they don't say a lot about what he worked on, other than Dragon Age, but damn, that man must have touched a lot of games. A lot of my favorite ones, too. So in 2022, an article was published regarding Mark Darrah and talking about why DragonAge was built on the Frostbite engine, which honestly, I know I've seen a lot of complaints about the changes regarding the look of the characters. That's going to be a lot of engine-based stuff. So a lot of these engines are apparently set up to make things a little more cartoony. But BioWare was encouraged by EA to use the Frostbite engine because Patrick Soderlund wanted EA to have its own exclusive in-house engine, and so they could either fully support DragonAge Inquisition on Frostbite, or BioWare could have continued to build it on the Eclipse engine, which they used for Dragon Age Origin. But at that point, EA wouldn't have supported it. Adapting to the Frostbite engine tasked the development team severely, as Inquisition didn't have a save system. As Inquisition didn't even have a save game system in the entirety of its alpha. Darrah went on to say that developing the tools for Frostbite took up about a third of the project's development time, and that having to support PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions of Dragon Age Inquisition ended up being more trouble than it was worth. Curiously, BioWare agreed to complete Inquisition by 2013, fully knowing that Electronic Arts would have to delay the game by a year because the production on Frostbite demanded so much. So that's just another thing of background stuff that people don't understand about delaying things. If I have some bone to pick with gamers in general, it's that they often don't understand how changes can really affect development time. I just want it now, which I get. I mean, no one wants to wait for a game, but at the same time, sometimes waiting's better. Therein lay the problem. The tools developed for Dragon Age Inquisition on Frostbite were never used for Mass Effect Andromeda or Anthem. The development teams in charge of those two games eschewed the work built by Dragon Age team in favor of creating their own tools. But unfortunately, the miracle and long hours of crunch, which allowed Inquisition to emerge as 2014's Game of the Year, didn't translate to the BioWare games that came after. Mass Effect's Andromeda and Anthem were declared disappointments, and BioWare found itself at a crossroad. With Dragon Age Dreadwolf in the middle of its development, Darrah believes that the tactical camera featured in the franchise will not be making a return to the sequel, nor will Inquisition's vast yet often empty open world. The developers of Dragon Age learned too late that quantity did not always translate into quality, and chasing the size of Skyrim's playable area ultimately caused Dragon Age Inquisition to feel diluted at times. There's a lot of optimism that Dragon Age Dreadwolf will take the lessons learned from the development of Inquisition and the tools built for Anthem as opposed to relying on BioWare magic to succeed. And the disappointing thing here is I think that the Inquisition tools would have likely been better for Dreadwolf than the Mass Effect tools. But I'm going to say they probably used those Mass Effect tools, which is going to be a huge disappointment. And this actually explains a lot of the complaints you get from people who don't like Inquisition. I loved Inquisition, but I'm apparently okay with running long areas of open space. So there's that. As they were trying to be as big as Skyrim, which actually that makes sense. I'm totally fine just running straight through Skyrim all the time. I still haven't actually beat that game. I've got probably 1,000 hours into that one too. There's something wrong with me. And then in 2021, Dragon Age loses its creative director. Matt Goldman left BioWare after he'd been the senior creative director on Dragon Age since 2017, so he hadn't actually worked on any of the previous ones. As reported by Kotaku, Goldman's departure from BioWare was announced in a recent staff email written by studio general manager Gary McKay. In the email, McKay explains that the creative director has agreed to leave the studio after the two parties mutually agreed to part ways. I'm writing to inform you all that Matt Goldman is leaving BioWare, said McKay in the email. We have mutually agreed to part ways, and his last day is today. We understand that Matt's departure has an impact on you, as well as the game's development, the email continued. Rest assured, our commitment to a high-quality Dragon Age game has not wavered, and we will not ship a game that is not up to BioWare standards. EA has since confirmed to Kotaku that Goldman has departed the company. Matt Goldman is no longer working at BioWare, the publisher said in a statement. He leaves the next Dragon Age game in excellent hands with the team here at the studio who will carry forward our vision for the game. Goldman originally started work at the studio in 1998, where he worked as an artist on a number of BioWare games, including Baldur's Gate and previous entries in the Dragon Age series. Following a spell working on Halo Wars at Microsoft's Ensemble Studios, Goldman returned to BioWare in 2017 and was appointed the role of Senior Creative Director on DragonAge 4. So that's another long-time person gone. DragonAge 4 executive producer has left BioWare, and this is Christian Daly. You recall he took over earlier in 2022. As we continue our journey, we wanted to wish Christian Daly a heartfelt farewell from BioWare. BioWare General Manager Gary McKay wrote, Christian started with us back in 2018 and has been a big influence on our games and leadership team, most recently as executive producer over Dragon Age's development. The game industry is ever-changing, though, and sometimes folk want to go and try new things. We understand, but we will miss him as a friend and a colleague. Prior to taking the reins on Dragon Age, Daly was the franchise development director for Anthem Life Services, and then the studio director at BioWare Austin. He confirmed his departure from BioWare on Twitter, saying that he's looking forward to cheering on the team and playing as a fan. I want to reiterate that the Dragon Age team is killing it and the game is in amazing hands, he tweeted. Don't fall for the hate. Lots of positivity. Can't wait for when they can share more. I don't think hate was your real issue, but okay. Daly's departure comes just 3 months after the loss of Dragon Age 4 senior creator director Matt Goldman, but McKay said the project remains headed up by a strong leadership team of industry and Dragon Age veterans. That includes production director Mac Walters, a BioWare veteran who previously directed the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, longtime arts employee Corinne Bush as game director, and Benoit Houle, who has credits on every Dragon Age game since Origin and most Mass Effect's game as well, as director of product development. And then that brings us to 2023, where the production director left BioWare. Oh, I'm sorry. Production director Matt Walters, the veteran that they were just talking about, that was on all the others, left before the game came out. I wonder why. Mac Walters began his career with BioWare in 2003 as a writer for Jade Empire, which was considered to be one of the best RPGs of its time, thanks to its intriguing story and branching dialogue, elements that would go on to be BioWare's trademark for decades to come. Walters' next role was as senior writer for the original Mass Effect, before eventually becoming the lead writer for Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. After the Mass Effect trilogy, Walters began directing BioWare projects such as Anthem, Mass Effect Andromeda, and most recently Mass Effect Legendary Edition Remaster. Walters announced his departure amicably on LinkedIn, reflecting positively on his time at BioWare and expressing gratitude toward the people he worked with over the years. Though the decision was made towards the end of 2022, Walter didn't provide a specific reason for leaving BioWare, other than saying the choice was very difficult. His current status on LinkedIn showed that he is on a personal goals pursuit amid this career break. Matt Walters was the production director of Dragon Age Dreadwolf. Development of Dragon Age Dreadwolf has been derailed a few times over the years as BioWare has faced difficulty with Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda, and BioWare struggles regarding senior developers leaving the studios haven't helped. Hopefully BioWare will return to form and deliver a game that lives up to the hard bar left behind by developer like Walters. Oops. And then finally, again in 2023, August 23rd, BioWare is laying off approximately 50 people. General Manager Gary McKay wrote that layoffs were necessary to ensure the health of the studio as it continues its development on Dragon Age Dreadwolf. In order to meet the needs of our upcoming projects, continue to hold ourselves to the highest standard, and ensure BioWare can continue to thrive in an industry that's rapidly evolving, we must shift towards a more agile and more focused studio, McKay wrote. As part of this transition, we are eliminating approximately 50 roles at BioWare. News of the layoff comes as BioWare is in the midst of its development on the next Mass Effect title and Dragon Age Dreadwolf. BioWare announced Dreadwolf back in 2018, known only as Dragon Age 4, before going silent for 2 years. Then, during Gamescom 2020, BioWare released a short behind-the-scenes video that showed off bits and concept art, which included a message from developers that the progress on Dreadwolf was continuing apace. Later that same year, fans were treated to a short, light-on-detail trailer that teased the game's eponymous villain, and that's it. There's been no news about this game, no gameplay, no new concept art, and no information on the protagonist or companions in 3 years. Instead, much of the news coming from the studio has been a litany of high-profile departures. In 2020, Casey Hudson and Mark Darrah left. In 2021, Dreadwolf's senior creative director, Matt Goldman, also left. Most recently, Mac Walters, 19-year BioWare veteran and the Dreadwolf's production director, left in January. McKay wrote that BioWare is working to help the impacted employees find jobs elsewhere within EA's other subsidiaries. He was also quick to assure fans that the layoffs would better position the company to continue development on Dreadwolf. So there you go. You've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people. 9, I would say, reasonably important. 59 people that left in the course of the time between DragonAge Inquisition and the Veilguard. So that's 9 senior roles and 50 people from various roles, I'm sure, that left or were laid off. So the fact of the matter is that is the kind of stuff that made me worry for the game to begin with. When you have that many people who are normally devoted to their games, so many of these didn't stop game development. It's not like they retired because they got old or they were anything like that. They left because they wanted to do something else, which tells me that the direction that things were going, they didn't like. A lot of it sounds like it could have been the Frostbite engine. But that's all speculation. I can't tell you for sure. But what do you think? Do you think all of these departures and layoffs contribute directly to what we're seeing? Or do you think it's more something else? Do you think it's maybe more on the engine or more on the current society today? I think when it comes to blaming current society stuff, I think that's more in regards to the storylines that they give us and the characters they write. When it comes to the mechanics and everything, I think that's something else. I don't think you can blame DEI for bad mechanics. I guess maybe a little in regards to when they try to make it too easy to reach the biggest audience. But overall, I don't believe that is that specifically is a DEI issue. That is way more of a engine and rules issue and not letting people explore outside of the rules. Which, I mean, look at the MMO world. They get stuck in these ruts until someday somebody comes out with someday someone's sitting around, normally without one of these college degrees, just sitting around in their home and making their own game and stumbles upon something entirely new. And that's part of why I'm looking forward to a games crash, is because then we'll actually start getting innovation again. But now that I've managed to ramble a little more, let me know what you think down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. If you really liked it, you can feel free to share it around, and I will catch you later.